We're at like 10:20 in the morning, maybe 10:30, I don't know. On Sunday, I just loaded one up a while back, and my intention had been not to jump back in right away, but certain issues have me too upset, worried, whatever it is I do, to sleep. And I'm not really all that tired. I had some sleep last night, so I'm going to start this turn. So the biggie that's going on right now is it is 11 a.m. and the heat is already extreme to the extent that like any fighting is going to cause divisional morale factors to be hit, whichever side you're on. And any unit that moves more than half movement, its division is also going to get a divisional morale factor, which means everything is going to slow down real seriously. And that may give the Union time to position itself and get its defenses in order. It's kind of interesting because, honestly, digging ditches and breastworks and all that is pretty hard work. I kind of feel like that should also be impacted, but whatever. So yeah, what's going on? I guess we take a look at the board situation. All the Union forces are on the board at this point. There's nothing left over here. We got 6th Corps coming up. We got Stuart over here. He's been riding around the Union and is not really thrilled with what he just stumbled into. Should have known about it, but he's trying to get away from 2nd Corps. I figured he'd sling around to the right flank of the Confederate Army. Well, that probably was a bad move. I probably should have just gone back to where I was. Confederate forces, 3rd Corps was pushing through, but we got kind of diverted as 11th Corps has come in and smacked some of Heath's units around and caused a lot of problem there. The rest of 3rd Corps is doing fine, smacking Union 1st Corps around, and it's pretty beaten up. Beaufort's gone up there to try to help as he withdraws. Meredith's up here trying to join Beaufort. And then Confederate 1st Corps is coming down, but what you'll see is the Union 12th and 5th are kind of filling in a gap here and trying to form some sort of defensive position. Of course, they're kind of facing the wrong way, but Seminary Ridge goes both ways, kinda. It's better in the way it faces Cemetery, but it's not bad. Ewell is up here and not very happy with the attacks that he's been making. Even under attack orders, I've been facing Union units under defend orders that are in good enough shape, and it's a solid enough line that honestly, it's really hard to get a grip on it and do any damage. The only place I can really do damage is around the flanks and whatnot. It's really hard to do a frontal assault on a position, which kind of makes sense, but it feels more painful than most games of this type. Anyhow, I guess I'll start the command phase, see what we get out of it. I know we have some points banked from last turn, if no other time. I still haven't recovered my artillery units, but also I noticed I have some of Anderson that somehow got up here and has been fighting with Pender. These are situations that when I catch them, I'm like, yeah, okay, well, I'll try to fix it, but I can't do anything about what's already happened. So I'm kind of looking at it as sometimes units were detached and reattached to other things. You can look at like Pickett's charge and whatnot. There was a lot of, scrape together what units we could from wherever we could, and they weren't all first corps. But yeah, it's something most games don't really allow, the detachment and attachment of units. CWB does. I don't think there's anything in this game that allows for it. And certainly at this point, this shouldn't have happened. But again, I just write it off as sometimes weird shit happens. I'm not quite sure what to do with Pender. He's not in great shape at this point. I kind of feel like I need to pull him out of the battle. You know, if Heath's out of the battle and McLaws is out of the battle, Pender's in as bad a shape. But I also really want to lower the boom on what's left of First Corps there. Of course, 11th is in my way. So I think I'm actually going to assign Pender to an attack order. I could just put him undirected, but attack is much, much more effective. I don't know. I settled on McLaws and Heath are going to R&R. They were already programmed for it, more or less, so it's like, yeah, let's just fix them. I am making the attack with Pender. Pickett, Hood, Johnson. Continue the attack on the flank. Early and Rhodes, I gave them directed orders. That's just to give them the flexibility that they need to operate back there. And Anderson also has, as does Stewart. The rest of my sort of independent cav is all up here. And that pretty much takes care of everything. I spent 2 more points to allocate some points to 1st and 2nd Corps. I feel like 3rd is pretty beaten up at this point, so I'm not actually planning on doing a whole hell of a lot with them, although the extra points might be useful for R&R and whatnot. I'm going to move on to the Union, but I'm out of tea, need a break, and other painful factors are at play. All right, back up and doing the Union commands now. Decent amount of points. I think Reynolds is going to spend both of his points on initiative rather than padding points for later or banking them or whatever. Lee spent all of his on banking because I feel like on the offense you need to be able to do more. But I feel like it's important to get First Corps out of the hellhole it's in. And in order to do that, what I did was I gave them direct commands. That means if I win the initiative, I can jump with one of them and pull it back a little bit. But also spent an additional command point for each of them to throw an extra counter into the cup. Now there's an immediate fatigue cost to that, and that actually shook one of the units. Doubleday. Doubleday is now shaken. Which will affect his command roll, and that's kind of problematic because that might affect the movement that he can make. But remember, with the high heat, I probably don't want to move more than half movement on either one anyway. So by putting a chit in the cup, I'm paying the same cost that I would to move full movement allowance, right? Now, if you move extended movement allowance, if you happen to get a, hey, I didn't get any orders, but I'm willing to move pretty fast, that will also fatigue you. So it all kind of balances out in the same sort of way. I actually think that's elegantly handled in its own way, as well as far as the game goes. Some of the stuff feels like it isn't that elegant. Well, most of it feels like it isn't that elegant. Let's take a look at other orders. We gave defend orders to Shirts, who is running up against Pender here, and the accidental Anderson units that made it in there. Greg managed to get points. I want him to back up slowly. 3rd Corps, 5th Corps, actually both of them have defend orders because some of them are there on 12th Corps. 12th Corps flank facing Hood, I think it is. No, that's got to be Pickett. Facing Pickett there. And yeah, 12th Corps is still on defend orders as well. I gave dig orders to both of 6th Corps. Now, I think these guys actually should be partway through their digging already. So I left them, I put markers on them. I still haven't cleaned up the artillery, fucking hell. Like, they're just all over the place, right? Like, it's just such an obnoxious amount of, you know, compare it to, again, there's games that require a lot more flipping and unflipping and all that. Central Front Series is one of them. But it always, every unit damn near has to be flipped and unflipped, right? It's just so fucking different when you have to hunt through. There also weren't as many stacks, weren't glossy counters, and they weren't on as poochy a map. Although the Hot Gap map was pretty poochy. But it's just such a pain when you're just looking for a few counters, you know, maybe 3 counters max per division or something like that. Usually more like 2, 1, whatever. And not every division has counters that are flipped over. Even if they're engaged, they may not. It's just such a fucking royal pain. But anyway, I got those 2 digging in up on the cemetery and Culp's Hill area, which is vital. A couple of guys got march orders. Some people went in the cup, anybody you don't see here, and some of the ones that are here are in the cup too, because every little box has its own special rules as to how it's handled mechanically. And speaking of one, here's a brand new one that we haven't done before. I got 2 divisions that I put in reserve mode. One of them, the backup 5th division here, 5th Corps division, feels like reserve actually applies to them, and it actually also applies to Caldwell here, who's planning on moving up and maybe taking place of Greg. We'll see, you know, what kind of pressure there is, etc. And the neat thing, reserve is weird, okay? Well, so many are. Costs 2 CCPs. You put both DACs, now there are of course 3, so, you know, in the reserve box. Upon winning an action impulse, you have the option, you can keep it in reserve by not activating, or you can reposition it, remove one of the DACs from the reserve, and replace it in its divisional holding box. The division takes no activity roll, but gets half movement, but it can't attack. The second DAC remains in the reserve box, and the unit retains its reserve status, but I guess can't do anything. And it can be activated, in which case the DAC or DACs are returned to the divisional holding box. The first option is don't activate that unit. Reserve units do not need to be activated in a game turn, and they're not forced to be burned. If there's only one DAC there, okay, so let's look. At the end of the turn, if there's only one DAC in the reserve box, the division's DAC is placed in the player's URAC. That's the cup. I don't know why. Oh, if it's attacked, yeah. If both DACs are there, one goes into the direct, the other is placed in the holding box. Yeah. So if you're attacked, you get your reserve status disrupted. But if you're under reserve orders at the end of the game turn, you get some army morale points, and you're allowed to move, right? Well, not really. Yeah, I actually don't think I want him in reserve. He's in a stupid place. So what was it? Caldwell, we'll put him in directed instead, I guess. I don't know, fuck it. We'll give him 2 points back. Just throw him in the cup. I'm not planning on doing a hell of a lot. I want to move him into a position where reserve makes sense, is basically what I want to do. But the 5th Corps units, you know, they don't really make sense either. They're not positioned in a way that, like, I assumed you could move when you're under reserve. I don't think I want to do that, so let's give him his points back too. and throw one of his in the cup as well. Now that I know how they work, yeah, I mean, you know, it's a large, several paragraphs of rules about this one type of action. It's one of the more complicated. At the end of the game turn, you leave them there as a reminder that reserves were already purchased by the division. And then the next turn, they can be bought at a maintenance cost that's cheaper. But we're not going to do that now. Because I thought, like defend orders, build orders, everything else, I would get half movement now. I get half movement if I want to reposition, but I don't want to put them into reserve if that's the case, even though I get some degeneration. So maybe it would be worth putting him in reserve just to save points. I hope I gave him his points back. I don't fucking know. But yeah, and let me look into that fucking artillery and see if I can get it set up. Again, you know, I grabbed rules for a game, but I just don't have that much time where I'm reading anymore. Like, coming up here and doing this is a different kind of activity to reading. It's not like, well, if you just stopped playing this, you would read. The problem is that between me watching videos and playing Raid and whatever, I eat up all the time that I feel kind of comfortable just sort of relaxing and chilling out. I really hate that it's done that to my life, but whatever. All right. And I also had the wonderful experience of, again, little fucking snots. There's one out there just shouting the same thing again and again. I can't understand what it is, you know. But I don't know if it's somebody's name he's calling or whatever, but he did it for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then it stopped and I figured, okay, you know, somebody killed him or something. But then it starts up again. The same thing, like, you know, just a couple of syllables, just repeated again and again and again. About, I don't know, about every 2 seconds or something. You know, probably part of some stupid game or something. But adults don't tend to be that annoying, usually. Most of the time when they're at things where they're, like, you can usually avoid where adults are that annoying. But children are almost always that fucking annoying. Yeah, I'm not really in favor of the little shits. Wow. It's so weird when something's up on my roof or playing with the chimney. I hear the noises and I'm like, what the fuck's that? This wasn't too loud, but all right. I caught the artillery. I don't know. There's probably some I haven't managed to find. But it does point out another good reason not to fire your artillery is you won't have to unflip them at the end of the turn. I mean, really, that's the kind of decision making I'm making. They hardly do anything, and they probably shouldn't. They probably shouldn't. They might cause some cohesion hits. They might cause morale checks and stuff. They soften up the enemy line, but in general, firing them, I don't know, it's not that impressive. And the cost in terms of mechanical actions you have to take because of doing it are really fucking obnoxious. You know, it may not seem like it's that big a deal to unflip a counter, but yeah, there's one. Yup, oops, I don't know what happened there. A couple of them. Is there a third one there? I mean, that's the thing. You have to paw through and see, do I have... Well, you can't have 3 in the same space. So that would be cheating. I wouldn't put it past myself, but yeah. And, you know, I thought I had found them. No, there's one there. Might be another one down here under something here. I don't know. Sometimes they get flipped over for reasons that aren't legitimate. Yeah, and the other thing is, flipped over counters mean one thing for regular units. It means they're damaged. Flipped over counters for artillery means that they're ready to fire. Because when I say flipped over, I mean the back side of the counter. The back side of the counter is actually the unflipped side for the artillery. The unflipped side for the infantry is the front. Let's just make everything as clear as fucking possible in this game, right? And gets the initiative. They're, you know, spending a couple points where the other person doesn't. It's a huge advantage, obviously. And I trigger Wadsworth. But this is as far as I get, and these guys actually move forward to rejoin their command. They have to try to do that. I don't think I'm getting out. I just don't. It does not look good at all. We'll see what these guys can kind of do when they get a chance. The Union got to move both Wadsworth and Doubleday, but they didn't get the initiative in time. Pender, who has attack orders, and is basically worn out, but is going to try to cut off Buford here, and also do something about 11th Corps. Now, Pender's in pretty iffy shape, to be honest, and he's going to be attacking in the heat, and that's going to throw him into shaken status at the end of this. You start hitting these. Schurz is under defend command. He hasn't been flipped over, which gives him some modifiers to his benefit, but he gets flung back. He was a little beaten up. I threw him in there because it was obvious Pender was coming close to him. This I just did contributing fire from now, realizing that he's not part of Pender. But here's where we come to a problem, and I've got more attacks over here on Buford that I have yet to take into account, but they're both going to face the same kind of issue, which is that Schurz had to take some fatigue hits, morale hits, whatever you want, for defending. But I think the weather, the way it's stated, to find it, it's here. Okay, any unit which moves more than half of its basic combat or which engages in ground combat either as attacker or defender. Notably, Pender could move full movement and attack at the single cost, no question there. Gets an automatic -1 DMF to their divisional modifier. This is in addition to anything that it gets because of division's orders. As far as I read that, if Schurz gets hit again, if Buford gets hit again, they don't get it assessed against them again. But I don't have any means of reporting that or recording that in terms of, like, you know, and it's not like it's some kind of sequential I go, you go type situation or something. It's got a fucking chit pull in it. So it's like, how do you know? How do you know what you remember, you know, what units were attacked, what weren't? I guess I could, you know, use different kinds of markers, like hash a marker in or something, to indicate something special about losses for this turn or whatever, just to handle this one weather issue. There are ways around it, but yeah, otherwise I'm just going to have to remember that Schurz has already taken his hit for being engaged actively this turn, whatever that means. And that means if I move him, I can move him full now, because he's already paid the penalty, right? There's another little thing here. Let me see. Not that unit. The Confederates chose not to follow up. This guy has a little weird red mark there. I don't think that means anything. Why is it there then? Yeah, I don't know. We got something oh, there's another cannon I missed. These guys haven't done shit, so. I think like Hood's Texans have a little star on them. I think those are just like special insignias for certain brigades and whatnot. But, gee, thanks. Let's put absolutely useless shit on the counters, not explain what it's for, and leave you kind of wondering what the fuck is going on. One thing that it's helpful to is keeping, that particular brigade together, if that were the case. But in this particular case, Hood's Texans all have it. In this case, it's Schlemiel's, but other Schlemiel units don't have that little insignia on it. And also, most units don't have some kind of little thing. There's some kind of special thing about that particular piece of the brigade, I guess. I don't know what the fuck it's meant to represent. Thanks, Barber. Thanks. Anyway, another mess due to glossy counters. Unable to pick them up. And, things end up flipping over, like I think these were damaged already, but I'm not positive. But the unit they're on top of, I just dealt with them, but it's fucking painful. And we've got little shits back again. Now, as we start to deal with Gamble here, now, I could retreat into this hex. That's part of my same brigade, which would cause less so these guys have a morale check. They're liable to fail it. They're not in good shape. Beaufort is not damaged at all in terms of his divisional morale, but we're looking at a 5 drops down to a 3, drops down to a 1. So we're looking at a +1 on the morale table. Only got a chance of surviving it, so I'm going to stay there, because otherwise, if I retreat through here, I take a cohesion hit, and then I'd have to retreat here, and I think this is the only viable retreat that I'm allowed, because there's an ordering to the retreats. You have to follow the priorities. Well, I don't know, because my first hex would be legitimate here, and then my next hex, I guess, would have to be back through these guys, which... anyway, so I think I have to go through Beaufort. He's got Devlin with him, which means Devlin's units would each take a cohesion hit and be in worse shape. There's some chance that both of these survive. Let's see what it is. Or let's see if they make it. They're both at +1. The nice thing is they're not already shaken, so they're not going to get the bad result. But at +1, 8, 9... 10, 11, yeah, they're both just going to be shaken, which works out pretty well. If I had retreated to reduce the penalty of the morale check, I would have done a lot of damage to everybody. So unlike most games, I can't just put a shaken marker in there. I got to paw through and put another one in there. And I've just gotten everything straightened out from the last time my fingers or tweezers went in there and messed everything up. Beaufort's able to actually kind of fight his way out, knocking some of those Pender units. They wanted to retreat. Even out here, they're at -1 net on their morale checks, which is not good. It's only likely to give them a shaken because they weren't already hit in that way. But yeah, Beaufort is now lined up, and we got First Corps and the Cav all up there. It looks, like a pretty solid thing if we can only connect up here and swing back and everything. 11th might be able to give us some support. Pender's not in good shape. If we have the right to hit him, and the only thing that does is Barlow, who is here. This is part of Schultz. Or Shirts. It's Shirts, right? Yeah. It's not a pleasant situation, but we still have this damn cannon here. And this guy lost. Now, Hood basically cuts off any real hope that First Corps had of getting out of here easily. Yes, those artillery fired. Because of the heat, or haze, either one. But I think I was forgetting it for the most part with the hazy. There's a lot of smoke accumulating on the battlefield, etc. Visibility gets worse. I guess that's the excuse for it. There should be a lot of smoke no matter what. I don't know that the heat particularly holds it down worse. And I also, so it impacts visibility, it impacts artillery effectiveness, all kind of shit like that as well. But anyway, yeah, they cut down here. The calculations for the combat are getting more and more complicated. So, you know, I figure the original strength of the units. That's easy. Okay, that got me to like a +5 or whatever for this last fight here on Wadsworth himself. And then the DRMs, contributing fire, support fire, that's the units around. I'm getting used to doing that, right? But I forgot about the heat effects earlier, but anyway. Difference in command rating, sure. So that got me up to like a +9 or +10. +9, I believe. But then, that means +9 -9, and then we have to calculate modifiers to each side on top of that. So the attacker goes up to +12. The defender, because he counted as a defense order, because he's sitting on a wagon there, takes it to -6. So now it's +12 -6. They're shaken divisions. We don't have the weather in here. It's an optional rule, so whatever. So now it's at, what was it, +12 -7 from the shaken Wadsworth division, and then it goes to +11 -8 because of the weather effects. And then you roll the dice and you look up on the chart. But it is a really, really painful like mechanism that you're trying, you're trying to remember all these modifiers. I don't know that a chart would help particularly. Like, there could be a track for modifiers. I've seen some games do that. I end up doing what I do here, which is I don't want to deal with the mechanical aspects of such a tracking particularly. So I just do it in my head. But you can see why it's painful to do the combats. Is just, and that's for each one. And then once you're done with that, right, then you have to decide, you have to fiddle with all the counters and rotate all the little stupid number markers, maybe flip units, come over here, mark down the hits for anything that's flipped or whatever. Then you have to decide whether or not you're retreating as the loser. And then all losing units have to roll their own morale checks, and that requires more fiddling perhaps or whatever. And in this case, it didn't really require anything except inserting a couple of shaken markers into the stack. But, it's just, you're so often pawing through the stacks that you're fighting with and everything, so that a single combat takes quite a bit of effort. Now, again, you can argue, look, dude, you play La Grande Guerre, that takes, a great deal, but it's not on an individual decision, right? It's like I calculate out combat after combat. I'm doing rounds of combat within it, and each round is relatively easy, and there's potential for decisions in between those rounds to retreat, whatever. If I look at something like Empires in Arms or EU, I'm doing 2 or 3 rounds of combat again. And yeah, I have to scribble down numbers and everything, but also, there aren't this many, right? It's not like all along the line they're being attacked. The one bright spot is the heat and whatnot is causing such fatigue levels to happen. I mean, like, Hood here is wearing down. I'm going to have to call off the attack pretty soon. The thing I'm hoping for is to wipe these guys out and then just settle down and say, yep, it's too hot a day to be fighting. Oh, Lee really shouldn't be sitting out here. Luckily for me, I mean, I could have moved him, but I don't know where I want to move him until a lot of my units have moved, right? Because I kind of want to, you know, if these guys deploy out, it's not such a terrible thing for him to be where he is. But right now it looks like there's a big opening to run up and get him. Now, the chances is, the way I'm interpreting the rules, the chances of capturing him or hurting him are pretty low. So it wouldn't be worth a stab just to grab him. Much of as it would be a huge coup, and the Confederacy would be in a lot of trouble if Lee gets killed at Gettysburg, right? You know, his reputation is high enough at this point that, like, his loss would be a major blow, especially just after losing Jackson, man. Okay. I do not want to do any more right now. Maybe I'll try reading rules. The thing I put up for rules-wise is the Men of Iron, the Norman Conquest thing. You know, part of me just says, look, I can keep going with this. Unlike the feeling I got from Vietnam where it was hopeless, where I wasn't getting any picture or anything out of it. Yes, this is tedious and painful, but I'm getting a nice story out of it, man. I really am. And there are aspects to this that I like. Maybe I'll raise my rating. Right now, it's got a miserable 3 rating from me. And I think it deserves more than that. Not a lot. Just because it is just too fucking cumbersome. But it's fucking Gettysburg, man. You gotta love anything that portrays, you know, this kind of scale of a battle in detail. And I am beginning to be able to see through the system and see what's happening a little bit more. I managed to do 2 more activations, one of which I don't recall. Yeah, great, right? Yeah, I really don't know. I pulled oh, I know why. I pulled Bernie over here, and he's in the middle of the line. So I fell back a little bit, but there's not much I can do. I want to give up ground, but not too much. And I've got some defensive terrain up there that I kind of want to hold, so what the hell. We'll see if we can hold it against, you know. Because the thing is, the same problem that the Confederates have with attacking in a mass, you know, in basically little groups, well, I don't want to give them the edge by falling back with one of my divisions in the center of the force. Now, obviously, directed commands allow you to do that, but I've got defensive orders, which means I'm reliant on the Chit Cup. So, you know. Yeah, defend kind of means defend in place, unless you're on a flank, in which case you can kind of refuse it and whatnot. And it does kind of make sense. And then Pickett attacked, and that did not go terribly well. Pickett himself had his horse shot out from under him, so he's over here. And that's why there's a big stack of units with shaken markers in there. And after doing a couple of those, I'm exhausted, man. Honestly, both activations were kind of painful. I know this didn't sound like much, but I had to paw through a lot of units, move things around, shift them a bit in the line. And then I had 2 attacks over here, and they were kind of compounded attacks. There were a lot of units involved and everything. And yeah, I mean, you know, activate 2 divisions and that's all I can handle. And again, that makes me feel like Vietnam, in terms of, like, you know, it's just too much off of what should have been a fairly easy thing to do. It doesn't help. I'm in a poochy area of the map. The stacks were kind of large, all that shit. Monday morning, about 8 a.m., I guess. because what other letters would you put after in the morning? It's kind of a nice gray day. I might be able to activate in ways if it stays. It's supposed to be kind of cool and overcast, so that's kind of nice. All right, let's jump back in. One of the thoughts I was having, because I did start reading the rules to that next thing, or likely next thing, is, I'm probably just going to leave this set up and play downstairs. It's a small enough game that, I don't need everything up here. So it's going to fail to, drag me away from this. At some point or another, I've got to get just, so disgusted. But again, the story, man, the story. For actions, Humphreys pulled back a little bit. Johnson came forward, hit one of Ayers' units. Now, this is an expensive, fatigue cost to be doing an attack and only hit one unit, but I don't want to make shitty odds attacks. And as it stood, it wasn't that great, it was good. but yeah, and ended up, these guys can move forward. Ended up taking this space, which was giving a 4-point, this is why it wasn't great, because I had a unit below the cliff, and it was giving a 4-point advantage for that. Now that cost the Union, of course, off their army morale, which is getting ridiculously low. And we're going to have to enter into something that's going to be really weird. At some point or another, I'm going to have to throw units in reserve that I don't really want in reserve, simply to gain back points there. I'm going to have to just declare that units are in reserve. I was close to doing it this turn, but I was kind of let's put units that at least are kind of close to generate that. But, honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense, to do it, but to just take that function of raising morale by just, declaring something like back here as being in reserve, not committed to the battle, not able to do a damn thing at all, except start recovering points on there. Because I'm worried within the course of the first day, the Union Army will break if I don't do this. Now, it doesn't make sense to me, right? It makes sense to me that, yeah, okay, there are units that haven't yet arrived, that are on the field, and somehow they improve the morale or something. But that's got nothing to do with, what the reserve order is meant to do, functionally. And it just seems so minor compared to, hey, we're winning the battle on one side. You don't get points. Unless I'm mistaken, you don't get points for, gaining terrain or anything like that. The only minus is you get points for capturing enemy supply wagons, and you get points for rallying a division, which it's less than you lose for it, I think. Yeah, it's less than you lose for it. Either half or a third the amount that you lose. But yeah, there's nothing that eggs your army on and improves its morale other than just declaring that I've got a reserve. Which, comes down to what? Somebody gave orders is all it really comes to. I mean, if it has no positional or tactical significance, what it just comes down to is there was somebody to give orders to those units, and they didn't do much. And they weren't resting. They can't be resting. It just feels so odd, and it is one of the real sticking points that I have. There are just certain things in the system that I'm I don't think you can convince me. Yeah, I can make my little argument about, the troops weren't actually having to be used, so that's cool. Yeah, that doesn't convince me. That's like the Triarii in a Roman battle, which, sure, they just stood there, and maybe they had some slight impact on morale by doing so, but It wasn't much. Their armies broke while the Triarii were just standing there. Looking up one set of rules, I ran into something that I think is a little weird. So falling back, Johnson advanced up here, pushed his way forward, is in contact with the enemy. By doing so, he forced the enemy to have a worse morale check, but he could have actually followed that up by falling back. And that would be a retreat without any cost. Now, if I lost defensive terrain, it would still trigger the defensive terrain, but I'm allowed to advance and then fall back. And again, it's just like, come on, man. You know, it's just, I don't know. But it does allow you to trim your line when you're active, I guess. It also gives you extra movement, essentially, because how does it work? All troops involved in combat. Okay, yeah, no. What I was thinking was, doesn't that allow me to move back and then fall back another couple hexes, up to 3 hexes for retreat, which is more than I can move in some cases? Yeah, no. It's only after fighting, so fine. And at least there's that. I see what the intention is for. It feels like, though, again, I'm going way into like too many details, and that the game system doesn't actually support this, and you know, it's just getting too extreme. I think it can be abused in some ways, to tell you the truth. For example, pressing forward, pushing the enemy back further, and then trimming your line by falling back, which is probably what it's intended for, but I don't know. It does prevent some situations that I've seen in some games where an attacking force runs out ahead of its line and ends up in a really unpleasant situation. I kind of like those circumstances. And it's not like you must advance or anything like that. You're only doing it to force the worst morale check on a unit, which is why any kind of flank attack is really, really potent, and anything against the main line probably isn't, because you can't advance against that. You really can't. You can't break through. You'd have to break through multiple hexes to get any kind of breakthrough type situation. Again, reasonable, I think. I don't know. Just weird. So what was I looking up? Because now I've forgotten. I got an act. Oh yeah, I'm looking up the build rules because I'm not sure when it actually happens. I think it happens when the chit is pulled, but that may not be the case. I know I'm allowed to move half, but I haven't completed these buildings or construction work, so I can't actually move yet. The digging comes at the end of the action phases. I don't know where that's going to be. There's no actual impulse for it. So, yeah, they got to stay where they are. They're in the midst of building. They're not, you know, if they move, they lose that. They are allowed to move. The point was paid to keep them in, or to put them in full build, and now they stay there for free, I think. It's kind of like rest and reorg. I like rest and relaxation better. But yeah, it's just so many. Yeah. I much prefer the games that have very, very much more simplified mechanisms in play. Here I'm thinking of the TSS CWB concept. Yeah, you know, during your movement phase, you put a build marker in there. On your next movement phase, if you've still got it, you maybe get a second construction marker, or you complete your construction depending on the system, etc. You know, but the digging in happens during your activation rather than like, yeah, I've got the opportunity to move, or I have the opportunity to dig in, or I can stay where I am and continue digging in. But I could have moved half, which I did last turn, and dig in. Just to show some of the artillery action.
been getting activities where I paw through the units and nothing's happening. So like Geary here, he got hit up in his last attack. So I'm kind of falling back, or I'm kind of standing my ground, but not advancing. I could have advanced and tried to force them to attack, but I don't know. But instead, I'm firing my artillery here, which is actually penalized on the die roll. But I rolled double zeros, which means I was hitting this hex here. That double zeros means that I got a possible ammo depletion, which I'll roll for, and I might take some cohesion hits to my artillery for that. No morale because it's the Union. Special rules everywhere. And then because that's, it was +1, 7 to 4 is 3 to 2, so +1. -1 for the terrain gets it to 0. I think -1 for the weather. Go look that up over here. It's not there. So here's the thing. I'm looking here under weather effects, heavy rain, high heat, but there's also up here low light, light rain, overcast, hazy, or high heat, which has its own. All bombardment is a -2. And ranges are reduced. I thought just the ranges were reduced. Okay, so I was at 0, so now I'm at -2. So I got a total of 18. I'm going to do a cohesion hit and force a morale check on each of those units. Plus, I might lose some morale, which represents ammo. The personal side of things, I was, oh, squirrel. He's still visible. I couldn't catch him. Okay, but yeah, so yesterday there was a situation where I got an email from someone saying she didn't feel safe and she was heading over to my house on Friday. And then her boyfriend, whom she had been going home with or whatever, sent me like a PM, and I kind of, he's a very nice guy in a lot of ways, too nice, to the extent that like I don't trust him one bit. This is not someone I'm interested in, so, but I do care about her. And so she emailed me this. He texts me or PMs me with something on Facebook. The only way he kind of has contact with me, to say she had been heading over, but then he picked her up. And I just, when somebody says they don't feel safe, I feel like, oh boy, that's worrisome. I don't know what the hell I can do, especially since I woke up several hours after, and I don't know what it was. It could have been he was driving erratically or something like that, and she wanted to get out for that reason. But I had other fears as well. And so, I email with her, to her, look, he said, you got home okay, please let me know. She doesn't check her email until like, I don't know, sometime Sunday. And, this was Saturday morning after the bar closed and whatnot. And that she first emailed me. And so, I was really kind of worried about that whole situation. Now it's just kind of like, okay. I guess I can kind of understand, not, but it just sucked for me because I was worried and couldn't think of what I could do, like I could walk over to her house and then what would happen? She would either be there and fine and there's no issue, or, she doesn't answer the door. Those are kind of the options I have here. Like, I'm not that worried that like, something minor happened, but that it could have been really terrible or whatever. And then, I'm not gonna like break into her house. even though I know how to. But it just, and I just didn't know what the hell to do, and expected an answer back and whatever. So that's why I was stressing yesterday. Today, I don't have things like that to stress about, luckily. And I hope to be gone from this plane before I have anything like that to stress about. All right, let's go on that cheerful note. More activations. Ayers here got his activation again in defensive orders. I fell back a little bit more in front of Johnson. I'm kind of running out of room. These will be entrenched. That'll help. Then I can maybe fall back to another line, whatever. One curving down this way, I don't know. I gave up another point of morale in doing that. And it was kind of a painful, like anything that you're dealing with that's like close to contact with the enemy is just painful in this game. Like movement points change, all kinds of stuff changes. But then Stuart got an activation, and I'm just riding him right here in front of right. And this is one of the issues I have with Chitpul. This would be, I don't know, this just looks ridiculous, okay? The Confederates marching up this way, trying to get up on the road here or whatever. Instead of, like, I don't want to swing around and go through this. I don't have a lot of choices. I could deploy and cause right issues that way, but I feel like I'm causing them just as many issues by being in a nice little road column here. The other thing is, I noted, when you come on the board off the operational map, no matter what your formation was, even if you were in battle formation or whatever, you deploy along the road in like 1 hex per unit road column. That's how you enter the map in the main game. That's how you enter the map when you're playing with the operational. But if I'm doing any kind of movement, because of the way the movement points work, I can almost always keep all my units stacked to the maximum when they're moving. Now here, they're not using operational movement, so I don't really mind, but I kind of wish March mode had like, maybe it does, maybe I'm missing it. I kind of wish it had a rule where like, you couldn't have more than 1 unit per hex. But there's nothing of that nature that I saw there. Yeah, and I certainly don't remember anything of that type. So it's like, yeah, for some reason, when I make the transition to the operational map, no matter what, even if I'm deployed for battle, I go into road column on the road. And I have to be on a road. I'm not allowed to move off-road on that map, which makes sense once you get outside the general map, but maybe not so much when you're in it, except that then it would have to do all kinds of different terrain costs that it doesn't have to worry about because it's just operational movement. But if I was in, it just doesn't make sense to me that I'm allowed to be this compact, because this is going to be kind of tough to attack. It's just as good marching at the trail of my column, even if I was in march mode, as it is, as long as I'm not in defend orders or whatever, right? And, it gets supporting units behind it and all kind of stuff, even though they're all facing the other way. It's hour-long turns, but it's a little hard to believe. The other thing is, I'm basically blocking him. And another thing that changes is on the operational map, if you want to change direction of your column, you don't just do an about face or whatever. I mean, it's all abstracted, what your forces actually are, but you have to spend an entire turn turning your army around, your division around, right? Whatever that means. I don't know if it means you're putting the lead unit in the front anymore. That's what it kind of feels like, because that's what you're doing with counters, but it doesn't actually represent anything. So, because the formation is just an abstraction. But, if I wanted to swing back down this way, I could just do so. whether I'm in march mode or not. Again, the two games don't have the same roles. And given the nitpickiness of much of the tactical game, it's very, very annoying to me to see that the operational game just is not represented on the tactical map properly. Like, they just don't quite align. And it really, really irritates me, given that the designer obviously had no compunctions whatsoever in trying to make everything as, was willing to throw out any concept of making the system easy to play in order to capture everything within the confines of that system as accurately as he could possibly imagine. To the extent, the number of die rolls for morale checks and all that. It's ridiculous, right? But, yeah, can't align these two game systems. Even though I can easily see, a couple of paragraphs that could do it. And obviously I could mod it, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't think most of what this game is doing is necessary. It all feels like, stuff that at best would feel a little funny around the edges, but certainly no worse than the things I'm pointing out that are wrong between the two maps. Wadsworth got the next activation. I'm pulling from the cup now. Remember, he's already gone before, but he's paid for this activation. Just putting the extra activation shit in, you have to pay for, even if it gets burned and you don't end up using it, unlike the attacks, which you pay for when you actually use. And he managed to extricate himself from here, back here. But the problem is he's got a wagon stuck here with Buford's Cav. The wagons aren't very fast, and it's kind of hard to get it out of the way. I'm hoping to be able to get out completely, but getting the main of his division out seems more important than getting the wagon out. I've got plenty of wagons all over the place. Even with all the wagons I've lost, they seem to be pretty interchangeable, and so it's like not that big a deal to lose them. Compare that to like TSS there, where when you lose a supply wagon, it's a pretty big deal. I don't remember how many they have. I don't think they're at the divisional level. I think they're at the corps level. I think you have one per corps, which makes it very, very painful. If you're thinking about the Confederates especially, with only 3 corps and the initial attacks, you've got 3rd Corps coming this way, 2nd Corps coming this way. 1st isn't really in the game for the most part in the first day. You really need both of them, and you can't afford to lose them. The Union could lose more. And then you have like the Army supply train, which you don't want to get anywhere near the enemy. Unlike here, where again, they're pretty much the same as everything else. So the fact that I lost 3 of them, is that a big deal? I don't think so. I really don't. You'd think that the Union, having lost its entire artillery reserve supplies, has just, put itself in a situation at least as bad as the Confederates are in terms of ammo. Nope. I can resupply just fine off of the divisional wagons. As far as I can tell, contrary to the reality. In the reality of the situation, there were not artillery supplies being carried in the corps divisional wagons, whatever you want to have. The smaller supply units were mainly for small arms, which means, and TSS handles that perfectly fine, where to resupply your artillery, you have to send artillery back. And in fact, the Confederates did this historically using guns, and I think that was covered in this particular, no, it was covered in the line of battle stuff. Okay, fair enough. Last Chance for Victory down there. Yeah. There wasn't enough historical here. The Confederates actually sent their guns back to the artillery reserve to supply, hauled them forward, and used some of their artillery forces to supply units that were in situ. And that's something you actually can't do, I think, in TSS. In TSS, you end up sending the wagons back. You send the artillery pieces back, they get resupplied, and then they come back and have to find their way back on the line. It makes a lot more sense to be using some of the guns as ferries, you know, where their caissons are like just being filled up and they head back, and you don't actually, you know, you may not even send the artillery around with them, but they're just sitting there as a reserve to funnel the shells forward. The Union artillery was actually, so the Union was able to use, this is the thing, the Union was able to use corps wagons to supply their artillery. They definitely had corps artillery supply. And because I know the Confederates were sending their wagons back here, what, Cashtown or whatever? Yeah, Cashtown. Where they had their dump. And the Union dump was actually further from the field even, at their main supply train. And some of the corps did not bring their artillery supply with them. So there was actually a real problem with Union artillery supply. Again, this is all Dean's research for that. Where am I? What am I doing? I don't know. I think I was still talking about Wadsworth. I don't think I've started another action. And here, Doubleday, or more precisely, Rowley, is trying to pull out. He was not able to do it without fighting around. Fell back one hex, enters his zone, has to stop. So I pulled the other one here, pulled some reserves up. Ended up being kind of a wash. But, you know, I'm fighting one Confederate unit. That one Confederate unit took a cohesion hit. My 3 Union units each took a cohesion hit. So it's worse for the Union. Using lots of counters is bad, even if it's representing the same amount of men as like one counter. You know, the formation is so disorganized, etc., that maybe that makes sense, but maybe it doesn't. I don't know. All right, I've done enough for a little bit that I need to get away. I don't know what I'm going to do. Could do some yard work. That would be a wise choice. I've set up, I've got my battery charged and everything, so actually would be a pretty good idea. And I think that's what I'm going to aim for. I could also play some Raid, which would be a bad idea. Or just fuck around online. Did both. A little bit of yard work, even on the hill. I don't have it back under control, but it's getting closer. And then some Raid and watching videos and whatnot. And now we're back to this. All the pauses that I take. I don't remember what I got in my cup, so I peek in there. It's just Heath and McLaws. I actually didn't have to peek this time, but I peeked a little earlier. I don't have to do them right away. Early in Rhodes are my only other options, though. I just got a Confederate activation. And I don't know. There's some opportunity for an attack here, but I'd rather not do the attack while the heat's high, without sort of paying double and getting the attack bonus for it. Because if I'm going to be paying, yes, the defender pays too, but if I'm going to be paying, it feels really painful not to get everything out of it that I can. So I'm probably going to delay a little bit there. Although the heat's not going to go down likely. It could, but ouch. I just feel like my whole Confederate plan is completely stymied. I can't afford to put the pressure on the Union that I want to under this heat. I'm actually thinking about, there's 2 things I could do. I could launch an attack, not this turn. I think I'm going to stay where I am this turn, but I could I might inch forward. I could launch an attack next turn. There is kind of this nice angle here, but I think there's defensive terrain under there. Oh, but he's not in it. What the asshole? And he's down below the hill here too. This is because he can't inch away fast enough. Wow, this is not a terrible turn to hit him, because I could get angling on this and on this. Charge! Fucking pieces. I don't know what it is. I blame glossiness on them, but man, and certainly my counter clipping, and a little bit of pooch on the map and whatever, but I am just having so much difficulty keeping counters in reasonable position. And you know, it's reasonably tall stacks, glossy counters. I clipped them like the idiot I am. But yeah, Clash of Arms tends to put out games that are hard to play because of the components, you know? And yes, I mean, if I owned it, I could put Plexi over this, and that would solve a lot, I think. I'm not sure. I don't have a piece big enough. That's the problem. Really maybe a bonus. I don't think that I've hit Humphreys or Bernie under the heat. I'm hitting both of them. Now, I can only target these two. Yeah, I could have thrown more units in and gotten stack against stack, but my two best stacks are hitting him, and that's... I just can't afford to throw two more stacks in, I think. I don't know. Maybe it's worth it. If I'm going to hit this hard, I might as well hit real hard. See if I can just break him. Because I'm holding off Daniels here and Iverson. And I could get both of them into play, I think. And remember, artillery's basically halved, so I have to fire more artillery to get things going. Yeah, I think I'm going to go all out. As things are so congested, I have to pull the stack out. And my dexterity with tweezers has never been perfect. But these counters are particularly bad for it with their gloss. And again, the trim to counter edges. But I keep running into this kind of thing where, you know, I just don't get quite the grip I need and the whole stack just collapses on me. Again and again. And it definitely adds to playtime and annoyance levels and all that. Is once you fuck up one thing, you start bumping other shit, trying to extract, you know, the problem that you caused. If you get something out cleanly, well, that's great. But if you mess up something, it almost invariably starts causing issues with other things as you get your fat fingers in the way to try to, you know, prod things so that you don't lose the important piece of information. So this piece here has a 4 under it. This piece has a 3. This piece has a 2. And each one might have its own shaken marker and all that. Stacks could be 9 pieces high at a leader, make it 10, I think. Throw a breastworks under it. It's 11. You know, that's just crazy. Although hitting Humphreys, who was most of these units, maybe all of them, but I didn't count it as all of them, who hitting him because of the heat and whatnot, he turned broken before the attacks happened. It seemed like it would be a good time. All my attacks were at minus. Because I'm not under attack orders. If I was under attack orders, I would have been bonused. Oh, wait, is there a directed orders bonus? I don't think so. No. And it's not part of morale bonus either. Cool. I didn't think it was, but I wanted to make sure because I know there's somewhere where being under directed helps, but I know it's in the activity roll, but I thought there was somewhere else. Anyway, the attack mostly failed. I took more damage than I gave. My units are broken up. Yes, I weakened the Union defense more. So it can't be all that terrible, and there are big stacks of little units that I'm hitting. So, we also killed an artillery piece, which was worth some army morale. I thought I had gotten 2, actually. I thought I'd gotten another one, but I guess not. I guess I was just confused. And yeah, now I'm fatigued. I did one command. Ah, boy. Fucking again. You know, tried to shift things to get them into their hexes. The hexes are so small, things look like they had drifted. I was trying to see, and no, I'm not in contact. I was trying to see if I could maybe get a worthwhile attack or something against the cav up here. And it's just not worth fucking trying to do anything, because you have to put so much effort into like manipulating the counters to get them all even enough that you can see what the fuck's going on. And you can see I got spillage all the way to over here. This wasn't going on. This wasn't going on. This didn't move much, but somehow the pooching and everything caused everything to fucking go. So now I gotta spend a few minutes correcting what the fuck's there. And it just makes you not wanna, not wanna do things in the game, right? Like, it's like, yeah, I'll have to paw through the enemy's pieces. Now imagine if, it's not clear in this game, but imagine if it was a game where you couldn't paw through your enemy's pieces to see what they've got, with this amount of spillage happening all over the place. That's why I don't like that kind of role, because it's like so fucking easy to knock shit over in almost any game. But in this one, with the components involved, yeah, it's horrible. I fiddle around with Newton here. Ended up pooching the map, and there's a slant between the two tables and particularly bad space. Now, it's in a horrible location right now because I've got the crack between the two tables going right north of Culp's Hill here. And it's just going to be a perpetual problem. I may try to move the whole structure. Of course, that's going to topple everything if I do that. Good Lord. What was I activating? Yeah, Newton, who is under build orders, but he's under the first stage of them, so I don't think he's allowed to do anything. And he's basically where he wanted to be. I'm just trying to organize his units, but it's really fucking hard. Like, because I have like Eustace. I moved some Eustace over. Well, wait, I have one here, but I want my strong units there, and I've got to puzzle around, and every time I try to move things, I'm going to bump the map, and it's going to pooch, and it's going to cause, the stuff along the crack to topple. I'm just like, okay, fuck it, I guess I won't move it. Very carefully shifted the map, lots of recalibration, little stuff to try to fix things. And honestly, that did not work out anywhere near as badly as I thought it was working. Like, I thought it was time to quit at one point or another. It's still not optimal. I still have one hell of a bulge here. I wish I had realized how bad that was. I could have put like, some newspaper or something down. It would have to go under here. Yeah, because the downslope is right here. I normally, normally these tables are close enough together, but with this map, it's just not working. And yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of combat happening up here, and it's coming further down. It's also suboptimal because now I can't reach the Union as easily as I used to be able to. I had nice padding on all sides about what I like, and I was able to reach the map relatively easily from this side. But now, well, maybe it's easier from over there now. Oh yeah, much easier. All right, I've done enough having gone through the physical aspects of that. And, some of it was near disastrous in the sense that, like, the camera was sitting here, a heavy weight that's preventing anything from moving. So everything got kind of misshifted. Yeah, this tape shit does not work very well. Oh, fuck. I don't know. well, I'll try fixing it some more. But right now, I'm just going to turn off this camera. Funny, it's almost this compulsion to come up and play. Something I haven't felt in games or in much of my life. I guess work at times hit me with that kind of compulsion. Walk away from a problem, come back to it, and hit it again and again, even if it didn't really matter. Like, you know, the way my work worked, work, was we weren't expected to hunt, you know, all that hard to track everything down, etc. But I would get my teeth in something and just keep coming back to it again and again. But, and you know, it was kind of seen as, oh, well, that, you know, that makes him a good worker in this, as opposed to just the standard, which, you know, were pretty rare to begin with. But yeah, I mean, and I would wrestle things that sometimes were hopeless, to tell you the truth. But I wonder about it because, like, I'm thinking, maybe this is a substitute for work, right? Like, coming up here doing this, it's filling a void that I lost. And I used to pursue other games in the same sort of way throughout most of my life. And sometimes maybe the muscle memory kicked in, like with things like Le Grand Guerre or Europa Universalis. When I played those, I had faced this kind of situation through them where I'm like, gotta force myself. Or not even, it's just like, well, it's time to do that. You know, it's just time. But it's funny that didn't happen with Vietnam, right? A game that I respect, theoretically like, etc. Now, I had work at the time, but I also had work at the time, you know, when I was playing those games that I had a muscle memory towards it. I think something about Vietnam just, you know, the fact that the story wasn't accessible in it was the main hindrance there. So anyway, we're back. One thing about the heat rolls. I have full movement with von Steinwehr. I moved him here. But he couldn't cross this river. Now normally, under normal rules, you can move an extra hex, but that would throw me over the half movement points. And it's creating different kinds of dynamics in the movement, which again, feels weird. Like, oh, I spent too many movement points. I'm not sure what happens if I only have half movement points and I move that extra space. I think that would also penalize me, but it's not clear. But yeah, normally you can move an extra hex more than the movement points that you have available. But as far as I can tell, the heat rules don't have any special kind of exception. It's just if you move over the half points, which is different. Maybe the same factor would come into play if I had extra movement points and was only trying to move full. I wouldn't be able to move as far because I'd be going over the 1 times movement and therefore triggering the extra movement. That seems actually logical. It just feels so fucking weird. It's like now I'm barreled up against this river in a line, and you know, all of these units could have crossed it, but I'm afraid to because I might get fatigue points from it. I found a situation I don't think could possibly have happened. I've got 2 artillery pieces sitting next to each other. I'm assuming the bumping of the map or something happened in it, but we got something weird here where they're both unlimbered and just shooting at each other at point blank range at canister. Dunno. I'm assuming something in my manipulation of the map ended up causing it to happen. I don't care, I'm just playing it out. We're in the ugly situation where the Confederates have run out of chits and they're going to start burning Union chits. I'm going to choose to throw things out of direct command because what I don't want to do is lose either build actions, which actually don't matter, Defend actions. I don't see. This is the thing. I don't know what I have left in the cup. Let me look. Okay, I have one dude left in the cup, and I don't want to lose his movement. It's I think Gibson's. No, Gibbons there. Hayes is there. That means it's Caldwell. Caldwell's up there, but he did not die. Things got messed up over there. I don't know how badly. All right, well, I don't want to burn him, so I'm going to burn a direct command instead. A string of bad luck. All the direct commands have come out of the box. I don't want to burn any of these, but the Confederates, if they win the initiative, will get to destroy one Union unit's capability to move entirely. Well, not entirely. It gets to move two, and they get it. It gets to move 2 hexes. Now, finally, after attacks by Barlow's entire division, Merritt's entire division, or squadron, or whatever you want to call it, it's really just a brigade on independent orders, essentially. That artillery piece is gone. That's worth 4 big morale over here. You can see the Confederates have taken some, but the Union, man, again, we're not halfway through the first day, and the Union Army is almost broken at this point. I don't know how they can survive it. And a lot of that is, I rushed them forward. They were all healthy, but in rushing them forward, it brought the entire Confederate Army together relatively quickly. Mainly by tripping that trigger wire. And, you know, even ignoring the Confederate, like, extra 107 points or whatever, it's just horribly, like, unbalanced as it stands right now. Yeah, but, you know, the entire Union Army is almost on the board. It's a larger force. It's not as good a force. The quality of the Confederates is definitely higher, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to do what they did historically. But under these circumstances, in the terrain that I'm defending and whatnot, bringing both armies to bear to this degree, it is really hammering the Union Army. And I don't think, you know, I mean, look, it's not going to make it through the first day unless I can do something. And the only something I can do is put units in reserve, and I'm having real trouble doing that. But, you know, let's look at Gibbon. What would he produce? He would produce 4 points a turn. That might stem the bleeding a little bit. And the final chit pull was a Confederate successful initiative, whatever, burning Kilpatrick. He got to move a couple of hexes. I found out, oh wait, Custer's under Kilpatrick. It's very hard to identify, you know, which commander is in charge of something. I don't know. I mean, how hard is it, right? Part of the problem is that I have these gold-colored artillery on top. Oh no, Custer's gold too. Yeah. So he's essentially the same color as McIntosh and Huey, who are part of Gregg, whereas Kilpatrick has the same basic color unit, but he's not under Gregg, is he? No, well, they're part of the Cav Corps. Yeah, so that's the problem. They're counted as part of the Cav Corps, which is like the divisions of a corps here, but Kilpatrick is completely independent from Gregg and moves independently. Now, divisions move independently of each other too, so this is one of the problems I had, say, with 3rd Corps up here, was I'm poking through it and I'm like, oh, they all look the same. And you can say the same about the Confederate Corps too. The only advantage with the Confederates is I've got these big 2s that are a different color sitting on them. I don't really have anything that's... I have the swords. The swords. So Gregg's swords are white. Huey's are white because he could be incorporated into Gregg. and is now. Kilpatrick's got blue swords. I assume Buford has something else, kind of red swords over here. That's how I can tell the difference. But that's not as clear as the numbers. And then again, you know, the artillery obfuscates everything. So it's like, great. All right, we're done for a while because we're about ready to go into operational movement. And I don't feel like that's the easy part, but I think I'm gonna go do something else for a little bit. Really working through the cleanup phase, and some of it's really hard to tell. So like the units that were here, they ended up failing their retreat, their rally, which is pretty easy to do because they're in a zone of influence of artillery and they're shaken. This is where artillery is really effective, maybe too effective. But yeah, so, you know, it's very, very easy. You get a penalty of 1 for zone of influence, and, you know, the units are already beaten up. If they roll in kind of the average level, sure, they have some morale of their own, but if they roll kind of right around the average level, they're going to take a cohesion hit and fall back. But the problem is actually not just a cav unit got destroyed and the Union's looking in really bad shape, actually, but also that I don't have anywhere to retreat to that's not in a zone of influence. So I'm not really sure what retreating means, but I also lost like 4 here because I'm in a zone of influence and giving up a defensive hex. I think. I don't know. I don't know. And I'm just slowly working. You know, I've gotten through this part so far. Heath and McLaws have recovered some of their points. But yeah, this is one of the more painful parts of a very painful game overall. I don't think it's going to last much longer, though. That could go away in a turn. There's a tempering factor to the heat that I didn't realize that. +1 if the weather is clear at certain points, but in addition, if the weather is hazy or high heat, there's an automatic minimum 1 space shift to the left. So actually, I probably should have never gotten to high heat. I'll be falling back to hazy. I don't think that actually means the temperature's going down. I think what it means is the battlefield is less active, and you know, so there's less smoke in terms of the hazy, the visibility aspects. And even though, you know, it would have, there's less smoke being generated, even though the heat is doing something to keep it lower down or something. But also so that you don't just have like turn after turn where nothing can happen, which I was a little worried about. And we are moving now into the 12 a.m. turn. I get to put the 12 p.m. turn. I always get confused by that. We've got to put Pickett back on the board, put him back here. I think I covered all the shaken units. I may have gotten most of the artillery, I hope. It's always a bitch because, so the shakens, I can kind of cheat with them, okay? I can kind of lean down like this and see, is there anything orange sticking out? With the artillery, there's no real way of telling, is there like a gun buried somewhere in the stack that needs to be unflipped? Generally, I keep the guns on top, so, you know, that shouldn't be a problem, but I have trouble identifying. For example, I missed this one here on Pender, which I'll have to catch. I don't think that's going to be a big deal because Pender is shaken and is probably going to be joining McLaws and Heath over here in the, hey, I'm not really into fighting anymore side of things. That is the one thing that may save the Union, is that the Confederate Army while the Army morale isn't bad, the individual divisions that I've been using, a lot of them are pretty badly shaken up. And they've taken their fair amount of losses. The combat has been intensive or whatever. In fact, I feel like maybe it's been a little too intensive in the sense that... So one of my gripes about, especially about TSS, but honestly about most of the Civil War games, is that there's sort of constant combat. But on the first day at Gettysburg, and honestly part of the second day too, there was a lot of combat going on. Now, like, it doesn't really necessarily, like, I don't know. I mean, this game is definitely addressing the problem that I normally see. But it doesn't feel like I've been that intensively fighting, but the units feel pretty damn wrecked. A lot of them do. Like even Second Corps here, if we take a look at that, Johnson's pretty beat up, but he's been doing a lot of the work. Rhodes took some definite hits. The heat did not help, fighting in the heat. I thought I was going to be fighting in heat for the rest of the day, though. So I'm like, well, okay, fine. But yeah, the units are going to have to fall back and rest a little bit. And that will give the Union a chance to dig in. Those are actually breastworks now. I've got them on top because I don't know if I noticed them if they're not. I don't really like it, but that's what I do with the other games. So I figure, let's. I don't know. I don't know if I do. I think I actually bury them underneath. But one of the things is they're brown, which I don't know. You know, I compare that to, like, if I think about TSS CWB, both those games, the Confederate units are all kind of brown, tans or gray, and the Union units are invariably blue. And what that ends up doing is that allows you to use white counters for, you know, informational stuff. And the breastworks being white underneath, you can kind of see them as they're placed. But here, I mean, it's brown counters under blue units. I just don't know how visible that is. We'll see. I may end up moving them underneath. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit a second turn on this video because I saw the last video was only an hour or so. And that feels kind of like a waste. I mean, I'm just like, I really want to get more than one turn on a video. But when they were taking like 2-3 hours for a turn, it didn't make a lot of sense. It still probably doesn't. An hour a video is probably about right. But again, you know, there are ways of coming back to a video if you really want, you know, to watch it in parts and whatnot. So I figure those of you who have the stamina to have kept up with this to any degree, you probably can cope with a longer one. And I just don't feel like loading up lots of different videos, although it takes longer to load them. The main reason is this way I can go out, read. I don't have to worry about that. And I don't have to come back with what the story is so far. I do think a lot of the Confederate forces are going to have to pull back and start reforming at this point. They've been fighting hard, you know, for maybe 3 or 4 hours. That seems about right. That seems about right to have tired out to this degree. Yes, there was some fighting earlier, Heath facing Buford and whatnot, but yeah, I would say most of the units haven't been fighting too hard for too long, and that's kind of where I'm at. Is It feels like some of the units are a little bit more beaten up than they should be, both in terms of losses that they've taken and in terms of the fatigue points that they've taken. And this is just craziness. Yep, following you up in a column. Now, it's turned out to be just about a perfect day. The weather is fantastic. You can see the cloud cover. I don't like the cloudless skies that we've been getting for most of the summer. But this is just, beautiful. And I don't know, it's just really wonderful. I'm out, I have one of my chocolate milks and vodka, nice Maduro, reading some rolls, just, taking in the day instead of trying to rush through that other turn. I may end up, because I've made it quite a bit through the rolls, I may end up actually loading this sucker up. We'll see where I get. I had a couple of hours before I kind of have to get onto raid, so yeah, just enjoying it. Well, I finished the Norman Conquest's rolls, and I think I'm gonna play at least one scenario from that before I come back here. I may be alternating, play a battle of that and then come back, play a turn of this, etc. Right now, I really like the idea of getting away from this a little bit. And that may, as in some cases, like with 1822 MX, end up invigorating me towards playing more of this. Yes, I could keep going. There's no question. And, I'll come back and play at least one more turn. But I think the Union is relatively doomed. I really don't think their army can stand up to much more punishment the way things are going. So, we'll see. But yeah, let's get, well, this isn't a Berg, it isn't a Berg design. It's based on the Men of Iron system. But I don't know. The rules are kind of based more on the tri-pack, and I feel like some things have changed certainly between Men of Iron and Infidel, and this set of rules. I don't really remember. See, the thing is, Blood and Roses, which was still Berg at that point, had to deal with a lot of different things. Well, we'll get to it when we look at the rules, because I am going to intro those rules. So anyway, up this goes.